I could hear my mother-in-law on the phone screaming so loud I had to hold it away from my ear. She was saying the flights were canceled, the resort was canceled, the excursions were canceled, everything gone. 2 days before the biggest family trip of the year. And I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going warm in my hands, totally calm, listening to her fall apart on the other end of the line. She had been going for almost 3 minutes straight. I could hear other voices in the background, Richard's brothers probably, maybe their wives. Everyone gathered around Patricia while she lost her mind. When she finally stopped to breathe, I said, very quietly, very sweetly, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you forgot about me." "I guess I forgot about you too." Then I hung up. Let me back up. My name is Renee. I'm 30 years old, I have a 6-year-old daughter named Ava, and I've been married to my husband Richard for 4 years. Before Richard, I was on my own with Ava from the time she was 2. I worked double shifts, I took online courses, I did what needed doing. By the time I met Richard, I had built something real out of almost nothing. I was an operations manager at a logistics company, responsible for budgets, schedules, a team of 12, and the kind of high-pressure problem-solving that doesn't leave room for panic. I learned early that the best response to a crisis is not to react immediately. It's to think, assess, move when you're ready. That discipline has served me in every area of my life, including this one. Richard is a good man in a lot of ways. He works hard, he loves Ava, and when it's just the three of us, our life feels full and easy and right. But Richard has a weakness, and that weakness has a name. Her name is Patricia. Patricia is his mother. She's in her early 60s, recently retired, and runs her family the way a small country might be run by a very controlling government. She decides where holidays happen, who hosts and who brings what, which cousins are getting along this season and which ones aren't speaking. She is the keeper of the family calendar, the family history, the family image. And she has, from the very first day I met her, treated me like I was temporary. I noticed it before Richard and I even got engaged. The first time I came to Thanksgiving at her house, she sat me at the far end of the table with the children and the folding chairs. Richard was at the main table. His brothers were at the main table. Their wives, both of whom Patricia had known for over a decade, were at the main table. I was new. I told myself that's all it was. I smiled, cut Ava's turkey, and told myself to give it time. Time passed, the seating arrangements did not change. What changed was the ways Patricia found to make the message clearer. When family photos were being taken, she'd say, "Just the immediate family," right as I stepped into the frame. She'd organize shopping trips and spa days and dinners with the other daughters-in-law and forget to text me until they were already on their way home. She'd talk over me in conversations. She'd ask Richard questions about our life, our finances, our plans, our parenting, as though I wasn't sitting right there and could answer for myself. And Richard, every single time, would give me that look. The one that said, "I see it, I'm sorry, please don't make this a whole thing." So I didn't make it a whole thing. I kept the peace because I loved him, and I thought eventually his family would come around. 4 years of marriage, and I was still sitting at the folding table. I want to be honest about something. I am not a person who dwells. I have too much to do to spend my energy being bitter about people who have decided not to value me. I focused on Ava. I focused on work. I focused on the life Richard and I were building together. But I kept a ledger in the back of my mind, not out of resentment, out of awareness, because patterns don't lie, and Patricia's pattern was very clear. The annual beach trip was the centerpiece of the family's summer. Every August, Patricia planned a full week away, a beachfront resort, usually somewhere in Florida or the Carolinas, flights for the whole family, the works. It was her thing. She was proud of it. She talked about it for months in advance and for months afterward. I had attended every year since Richard and I got together. Every year, I packed my bags, organized childcare logistics, requested time off work, and showed up ready to be part of the family. Every year, I spent the week slightly outside every circle. Not invited to the private dinners Patricia organized with just her sons, not included when the other women made plans together, not in the photos that ended up in the quarterly newsletter. But I went, because Richard wanted me there, and I kept hoping. This year, something shifted in the early summer. Richard started acting differently, quieter, more distracted. He'd step out of the room to take phone calls. He'd go to bed after me and be on his phone when I woke up. I didn't interrogate him, I just watched. I've learned that if you stay calm and pay attention, people reveal themselves without you having to ask a single question. In mid-July, Richard sat down across from me at the kitchen table with his hands folded and his eyes a little too careful, and he said, "So the family beach trip is happening again. It's kind of already planned." I looked at him. I waited. He said his family had been organizing it in a group chat. He said he thought I was in the chat. He said his mom probably just forgot to add me. He said the trip was in 3 weeks and I could definitely still come if I wanted. He was sure they'd love to have me, and he was really sorry it worked out this way. I took a slow breath. I said, "Okay, let me think about it." He looked so relieved. He thought the hard part was over. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said he'd talk to his mom and make sure I was included from here on out. I smiled and said thank you. Inside, something went very still and very clear, the way it does at work when I've just realized the scope of a problem and I know I'm the only one who's going to solve it. They hadn't forgotten to add me to the chat. Nobody forgets something like that. You open a group chat, you add the people who belong in it, and you move on. I was left out because someone decided I didn't belong, and my husband had known about it for weeks and said nothing until the trip was so close that confronting it would make me look like the difficult one. Now, I need to tell you something that up until this point I had never mentioned to anyone, not to my friends, not to my sister, not even to Richard, because it had never seemed relevant enough to bring up. 3 years earlier, right around the time Richard and I got engaged, Patricia had come to us with a problem. A water leak in her basement had turned into a serious repair job. The estimate was nearly $4,000. She was embarrassed to ask, but she needed help. Richard wanted to give her the money outright. I suggested something different. I told him we should add her as an authorized user on one of my credit cards, one with a strong limit and a low rate, so she could cover the repairs and pay it back over time. And so we'd be able to see the charges rather than just handing over cash with no accountability. Patricia agreed. I added her to the account. Her name went on it as an authorized user, but the account was mine. My name, my credit history, my financial responsibility. She made the repair charges, paid them off within a few months, and then the card mostly sat unused. She had her own finances, her own accounts. I kept her authorized user status because removing it meant a conversation I didn't feel like initiating, and the account had a low balance and no activity. So I left it alone and forgot about it. Until Richard left his laptop open on the kitchen counter one Saturday afternoon while he was outside with Ava. I wasn't snooping, I was walking past, but the screen was open to an email thread and the subject line caught my eye. It was a booking confirmation for a beachfront resort, one I recognized from a road trip Richard and I had taken years ago just past the Florida state line. The dates lined up exactly with the family trip, and the payment information at the bottom of the email listed the last 4 digits of a card number I knew by heart. My card. I stood there and read the entire email, then scrolled through what I could see of the thread. Patricia had booked everything on that card. Flights for 9 people. Richard's 2 brothers, their wives, their kids, his aunt who made the trip down from Georgia every summer, a beachfront suite, a sunset sailing excursion, a dolphin tour for the children, a reservation at a waterfront restaurant for the first night. When I added it up in my head, I was looking at somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000, all charged to an account in my name that Patricia had been given access to for a $4,000 plumbing emergency 3 years ago. She used my card to pay for a vacation she had not invited me to. I set the laptop back exactly as I'd found it. I walked to my home office and closed the door behind me. I sat in my desk chair and stared at the wall. I did not cry. I was well past the point of crying about Patricia. What I felt was something colder and cleaner than anger, a kind of clarity that only comes when something you suspected all along gets confirmed in writing. I ask myself the 3 questions I ask at work when something has gone sideways. What exactly happened? What are my options? What outcome do I actually want? What happened was clear. Patricia had made unauthorized use of my credit account. She had been granted access for emergency home repairs. A 9-person beach vacation she planned in secret falls outside any reasonable definition of an emergency. What she did wasn't just disrespectful, it was fraud. My options were also clear. I could confront Richard directly. I could call Patricia and demand reimbursement. I could contact a lawyer. All of those were legitimate, but none of them were what I wanted.
A confrontation would give her the chance to spin it, to cry, to make herself the victim, to recruit Richard to her side the way she always did when she was cornered. Demanding money back would drag into months of excuses. And I didn't want a legal battle. What I wanted was something precise, something that let Patricia experience in one concentrated moment the feeling of being left out, of being forgotten, of having the things she planned and counted on disappear without warning. I did not act that day, or the next day. I went outside with Ava and Richard, and I was entirely myself. I made dinner, I asked Richard about his week, I was present and warm, and gave nothing away. That is something I did not fake. That is something I have practiced for years, every time I sat at that folding table and smiled.
I waited 9 more days, long enough for Patricia to finalize every detail and feel fully confident about the trip. Long enough for the whole family to get excited, to pack their bags in their minds, to feel like it was really happening. Then, on a Monday morning, after I dropped Ava at school and Richard left for work, I called my credit card company. I told the representative that my card had gone missing. I wasn't sure exactly when. I'd been looking for it around the house for a few days. I needed it canceled and a new one reissued right away. The representative was professional and efficient. She confirmed my account information, read back a list of recent charges. When she got to the large travel-related transactions, I told her I was uncertain about several of them and would be reviewing them further once my replacement card arrived. Standard procedure. She canceled the account effective immediately. The call lasted 11 minutes. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table and felt something settle inside my chest. A quiet I hadn't felt in a long time. What I knew, and what Patricia did not know, was that a canceled card doesn't just stop future charges. It severs every pending reservation attached to it. Airlines, resorts, and tour operators don't hold bookings against failed payment methods, particularly not in the middle of peak summer travel season. Within 24 to 48 hours, the cancellation emails would begin. And rebooking a 9-person, multi-stop trip, flights, resort rooms, multiple excursions, at 2 days out in August would be nearly impossible without paying double, if availability existed at all. I went to work that Monday, had a productive day, made Ava grilled cheese for dinner. We watched one of her favorite shows together. She fell asleep on the couch beside me, and I carried her to bed. I slept just fine. The first call came the following afternoon. Richard, his voice tight and confused, saying something was wrong with the credit card. Cancellation emails were coming in for the trip. Did I know anything about it? I said I wasn't sure what he meant and suggested he call the bank directly to get clarity. About an hour after that, Patricia called me. I have heard Patricia's voice in a lot of different states. Cheerful and commanding at the holidays, icy and clipped when she was annoyed, performatively warm when she wanted something. I had never heard her the way she sounded when I picked up that call. She was coming apart completely. The fury and the panic were running together, and she couldn't hold either of them straight. She told me the flights were canceled. The resort had released all their rooms. The excursion company had issued a non-refundable cancellation. She told me I had ruined everything. She told me this was deliberate. She told me I was vindictive and manipulative, and she had never trusted me, and now she knew why. She said Richard deserved better than me. I let her go. I let every word land, and I held the phone steady, and I did not flinch. When she finally ran out of things to say, the line went quiet. And then I said it. "I'm so sorry, Patricia. I thought you forgot about me. I guess I forgot about you, too." She made a sound I can't quite describe, and the call ended. Richard came home that evening looking like he'd been underwater for hours. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd told me 3 weeks earlier that the trip was already planned, and he said he needed me to explain what had happened. So I did. I told him everything. I told him his mother had charged nearly $15,000 to my credit card, the one issued in my name, tied to my credit score, that she had been added to as an authorized user 3 years ago for a home repair emergency, to pay for a vacation she had deliberately excluded me from. I told him I had reported the card lost because I had not authorized any of those charges.
I told him what she did had a legal name, and I had every right to do what I did, both morally and under the law. And I told him that the real conversation we needed to have had nothing to do with the credit card. He sat there for a long time. He didn't defend himself right away. He didn't defend her. He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. I watched him think, really think, maybe for the first time about all of it. Not just this trip, all of it. Every photo, every folding chair, every time he'd seen it and looked away. When he finally met my eyes, he said, "I should have stood up for you a long time before this." I said, "Yes, you should have." What came next was harder than any of it. The credit card situation was resolved in one call. What we had to fix after that took months. We went to couples counseling. We had conversations that were years overdue about how Richard had repeatedly chosen his comfort over my dignity and what that had built up in me over time. About what it means to be someone's partner and not just their spouse. About whether we could rebuild something solid on top of all that had quietly eroded. It was real work, uncomfortable and necessary, and Richard showed up for it in a way that I needed to see before I could decide what I wanted our future to look like. He made choices, good ones, that mattered to me. Patricia rebooked a stripped-down version of the trip with what she could scrape together at the last minute. She went. I don't know all the details, and I didn't ask. At family events since then, she gives me a wide berth. She looks at me differently now, not with the easy dismissal she used to. There's something more careful in it. She's taken a full accounting of who I am, and I think for the first time, she actually sees me. She has never apologized. I stopped needing her to. What I got was something she never intended to give me. She showed me exactly who she was willing to be, and I showed her exactly who I am. That exchange was worth more than any apology she could have managed. Ava and I spent that August week at a small beach house I rented for just the two of us. We had nowhere to be and no one to perform for. We built sandcastles and let the waves knock them flat, and built them again. We ate too much seafood. We stayed up past her bedtime every single night because the sky over the water at sunset was something neither of us wanted to walk away from. It was the best week I have ever had. They thought I was the kind of woman who could be overlooked. They were wrong. I don't need a seat at anyone's table. I set my own. I choose who sits at it, and everything on it I earned myself.